Hey folks, welcome. Today we're diving into some ultimate bass fishing action and sharing our top tips, techniques, baits, and lures to land giant bass anywhere you fish. Stick around, you don't want to miss this.
Yes!
Catching a massive bass in a smaller pond or lake can give you the thrill of a lifetime, and it happens all the time. Here's how you can do it. First, no matter where you fish, you have to understand the bass's behavior in smaller ponds. Their habitat is key, since they have nowhere else to go in a landlocked pond. Bass in smaller ponds are going to stay near any structure, fallen trees, logs, stumps, rock formations, or any type of weeds and vegetation. These are prime ambush spots for them and give them great shade and cover too. Now, of course, bass in smaller ponds are going to feed heavily on small fish like bluegill, as well as any insects and crustaceans that live in or drop into the water, and of course any frogs or small amphibians too. And bass love low light conditions, so they're always going to be most active feeding in early morning before dawn or just before dusk heading in the nighttime. So how do we catch the real monsters? We want to be using jigs with soft plastic realistic trailers like craws and creature baits in the colors that match what lives in that pond or lake. This is the best way to mimic the natural food and forage that they live on to flourish and survive. So here is a great hack to make sure you're able to keep throwing and ripping your trailer through all the slop. And that is to super glue the trailer onto the jig head the night before, and it won't slip down after every cast. It'll save you time and aggravation and allow you to place the baits exactly where you need them to be. Give this trick a try. It's really awesome. And spinner baits are another great way to cover all the water in the pond, especially if there are hard-to-reach areas that you can't get over to on foot. Spinner baits always trigger aggressive reactionary strikes in bass, and using a white and green chartreuse lure with one or more willow blades is highly effective to catch bass in ponds, even in murky water. And of course, the plastic worm is the most versatile bait on the planet, either Texas rigged or wacky style, that you can slow fish at various depths and spots for a very finesse presentation. Just vary your twitch and your pause and your retrieve until you get them to follow and chase the bait. And using a larger ribbon tail worm, even in the 10-inch or bigger size, in a green pumpkin is our favorite. The bigger the bait you use, the bigger the bass you're going to catch. Again, the purpose of this video is to catch the biggest bass in there, so we need larger profile baits to do just that. And you can certainly use topwater lures in the early morning hours just before sunup, or always on cloudy and overcast days. Topwater frogs, poppers, and buzzbaits all work wonders for bass, especially in smaller ponds. A black and blue lure creates a lot of commotion on the water surface and will trigger explosive blow-up strikes if you can get a big bass to follow it and then inhale it. Remember, if the bass can swallow it, they will eat it, even if it's the size of a small tire. And naturally, live bait also works really great in ponds, like live bluegill, if it's legal to use where you live, in the 5 to 6 inch range, will be what you use to catch the biggest bass of your life. And live minnows and live worms are always great choices. They will absolutely catch every fish and bass in that pond, and especially on days they just don't want artificial lures, like in summer when they get a bit more sluggish in the hot afternoons and don't want to expend the energy to chase a crankbait, topwater, or a spinnerbait. You can just suspend the bait under a lightweight balsa stick bobber, and trust me, when the bobber goes way under and you get a big bass on, get your video out and start filming all the acrobatic jumps she's about to make. Okay, hope you're still with us. Now we know where to target big bass and what to feed them. So now let's go over the best techniques, tips, and tricks to catch more and bigger bass every time and more consistently from trip to trip. First off, the key to successful bass fishing is casting accuracy, hands down. You need to be able to make long and precise casts to all the spots we talked about already without spooking them out of their hiding. So make sure to aim your casts for the edges of the cover and structure you're targeting, and around docks and under overhanging trees especially. And the real tip is to make sure you're always casting parallel to the shoreline, which is more times than not where the bass will be on patrol looking for food. Here are a couple notes to always keep in mind about retrieval speed for bass fishing, especially in smaller ponds. You want to use a slower retrieval in cooler water temperatures or when bass are much less active, like in early spring or late fall into winter. And make sure you keep the retrieve slow and steady. Also, you want to make sure that you are bumping the bait along the bottom and making occasional pauses so that your bait and trailer imitate a wounded or fleeing prey. And you should usually use a faster retrieve when bass are more active, like in late spring before spawn and in summer and early fall when they begin to fill up their bellies before winter slumber. When you burn your spinners at a faster clip and she gets on the chase, she is going to explode that strike, and it'll be a ton of fun watching her come up to hammer it. And you also need to master the flipping and pitching techniques when using jigs and soft plastics. You have to be able to put your baits within inches of the tight cover spots we referenced earlier. These are the money shots. You do this well and consistently, and you will catch the best bass and more bass every time you go fishing. Getting your bait right on top of them in precise casts around dense vegetation and around overhanging trees where beginners are afraid to throw for fear of getting hung up in the trees, that is where the biggest bass are hiding every time. So you need to practice getting in there, and you better have your large landing net ready, bruh. Okay, let's have a little fun now. Let's give you some real-life examples of how you would fish a given pond under a number of different circumstances, okay? Let's roll. First, assume you're fishing a small pond with very clear water, where you can almost see down to the bottom in shallower spots, and there are lots of submerged vegetation and cover everywhere. What should you use? Easy. Let's start with a white and chartreuse spinnerbait and make sure we place our casts along the edges of the visible vegetation. And if you see bass following it but not striking yet, we would then switch up to a Texas rigged worm, wacky style weedless rig 2, and work it through the cover slowly with pauses. And many times it's on the pause that the bass is going to hammer it. And here's another example. Let's say you're fishing early morning on a very cloudy and darker day, maybe even before a front is coming through, and you notice some surface activity around one of the overhanging trees we talked about. We would tie on a black and blue buzzbait and cast beyond the tree, retrieving it very quickly on the surface for a number of casts. If no bites, we would tie on a jig and a soft plastic creature and work it all around the tree, making different retrieves and pauses at different depths until he wallops it. Okay, now to wrap up with some other tips and tricks that you always need to keep in mind when you're bass fishing in smaller ponds. First, be quiet. Be quiet approaching the shore and bank because bass have excellent hearing and their lateral lines will feel the vibrations on the ground if you're clanking things around and being very loud or blasting your boombox. Think of it this way. If you know any deer hunters, they are so stealthy quiet up in their tree stand, they're even afraid to pass gas up there, let alone make a sound. No different when you're bass fishing. Be quiet and stealthy, and you'll always have a better chance of catching more bass. So to catch more bass, you need to adapt. Like we've talked about, be willing to change everything you can until you get them to bite. And never leave home without your polarized UV sunglasses either. Not only do they protect your eyes from harmful sun, a good pair will help you see the underwater structure better and help you with casting accuracy and see fish that are swimming around in there. Good luck. Go get them, folks. Okay, folks, thanks for watching. Please like this video, hit the subscribe button before you leave, and don't forget to enable your bell notifications so you never miss another great video coming your way.